Welcome to Monday Mondays. I am your host, Jeff the Wealth Builder. And on this episode, which is episode number 7. So I'm so happy that we've gotten up to episode 7. And thank you guys for joining us on this endeavor thus far. We are unlocking, yes, real estate riches. And I have a special guest, Jimmy Williams, aka JW the Blueprint, aka By the Hood, and we're going to talk about the math of real estate today. This episode is sponsored by Cash Value Wealth Builders, a community of professionals and entrepreneurs leveraging cash value life insurance to replace income and buy assets that produce monthly income. So we're going to typically bring in guests that can help you in that process of buying and acquiring assets that produce passive income. So Jimmy, how are you today?
I'm great, Jeff. And first, before we get started, I just want to say thank you for inviting me on your platform, man. It's definitely appreciated. And how are you, sir?
Man, if I was any better, I would be better, as the old folks will always say. So let's dive into this. I know we have a very limited amount of time, and I want to pick your brain, and I want to give our audience a taste of the brilliance and the mastery of real estate that you've acquired over the number of years. So I thank you again for being on this platform. I thank you again for joining us here on Mondays, where we talk to dope financial professionals. So let's get this thing started. Can you share your journey into real estate and really what inspired you to become a leader in this field?
So my journey, I don't want to say it's non-traditional because when you hear people's story about getting into real estate, you hear all kinds of stories. But so I was raised in the family, and I was always taught as a young age to be of service. I was taught to kind of operate with a village mindset. I was taught to be active in the community. And when I went away to school, so after high school, I went away to college, and my major was actually political science. I wanted to study politics, and I was trying to figure out a way to help my people. So I went to Lincoln University after graduating from Central High School in Philadelphia. And Lincoln University is a HBCU. Which was an intentional move by me to go to I think I only applied to HBCUs. I got scholarships to a couple other places, but my mind was made up that I was going to HBCU. So anyway, with that being said, I studied political science. After my first year, I'm still a teenager, still trying to figure things out. I had a grandfather who was very active in the local politics. And I said, listen, I want to, do some internships and learn. So, after the first year, I did some internships, worked on some campaigns. And what happened was I worked on campaigns such as the DA in Philadelphia, judges, all those kind of things. And when I say worked on, I was at the very end of the totem pole. I was getting coffee and running errands. So let's just be honest, right? But, so I was a college student trying to learn on the fly. But what would happen is there were certain people, when they made a phone call to the candidate, it didn't matter what time it was. It didn't matter who else they were talking to. They dropped everything and took that phone call. So I'm observing when we do fundraisers, I would meet these people and I would ask them, what is it you do? And the answer was always one of two things. Either they owned a business or they owned real estate. So just being observant and then studying, and, a little bit of time went by. I was doing that. I was given a book by Dr. Claude Anderson called Powernomics. And in that book, everything that he talked about, I saw play out because of my position as an intern, where the people who had the resources actually controlled what was happening. They had the real juice, the real power. It wasn't the candidate. It was the people that funded the candidate. So then my mind started shifting after reading that book and seeing, it's just one thing to read a book and say that makes sense, but to actually see it play out while you have a book in your hand is a little different. So I said, I need to study economics. I need to study land and real estate. So I've been on a lifelong journey of studying money ever since then. And throughout that journey, I've done everything in real estate. My specialty, I would say, is real estate valuation. I work as a real estate data scientist day in and day out, but I'm also an investor developer, the whole nine. But I'm constantly looking at real estate data, and the study of economics and real estate data has kind of like been my life from that point on. Once I had the understanding of who really has a say so in how communities and people operate.
So good. You said you learned some lessons about money back in those times. What was one of the biggest lessons that you learned about money during that discovery process?
So, just what actually money is, right? Some people have this understanding that money is just used to buy things, and understanding that money is truly time and energy was a big part of my journey. Myself and my partner at By the Hook, Corey, wrote a book. It's called Own Your Time and Space.
Okay.
And part of that book talks about the idea of money or currency or capital, however you want to, those are different, but we could talk about that too. But how it actually creates time and its energy. So if I exchange my labor for money, what I'm actually doing is giving my time. And by me having those resources, I can actually put that to work where someone who comes along in second generation, third generation, they don't have to exert that much energy or time. I've already done so. So that's what actual money is. Money, so money is a tool. Money's not good. Money's not evil. It's a tool that can be used for good or evil. And that's what I came to understand, because in certain parts of my community, people would talk about money being the root of all evil and money was evil and all these things. And I come to learn that money is actually energy and time if you understand how to accumulate it and how to get it.
Yeah, I like to refer to money as a medium of exchange, So those one of the great things that when you understand that valuation of money, that time exchange of money, that energy around money, it will make sure that, you can be in a position to kind of recapture your time and be able to have money to fund the things that you're passionate about. Yes. Those are some of the things that I like to talk about, especially in my communities, is really being able to have the purpose of money is to fund the things that, you are really passionate about. So that's really good. So we talking about real estate. And I tell you, man, I had so many crazy stories of real estate, especially real estate happened. I first got my feet wet in real estate investing in 2005, and, learned a lot during that whole 2007 crisis and the rebirth and getting in and out and learning so many different things. I wish I had someone to kind of give a little blueprint around that time when I got invested in real estate in 2005. So with that being said, like, what are some, if you had to talk to a new investor now, or even a seasoned investor, what are some of the key mathematical principles that every real estate investor should know?
So it's interesting because I got my start in real estate in the 90s. I was still a teenager. I was still in school, but I was already actively buying. And I made pretty much every mistake you can make. But the thing is, you learn from those mistakes.
Right.
I had scaled up to the point where I had about 60 plus doors. But at the time, this is before the 08 crash and all that. Because back in those days, you can just give them your name and you were breathing, they would give you a loan. So the fact is, I scaled up, but one day I took a step back and was looking at my bills versus my income and realized I could be working a part-time job and make more money. So my ego was fulfilled in being able to tell someone like, yeah, I own 60 properties, yada, yada, yada. But the truth of the matter is I wasn't really making that much money. And the funniest thing is, working and consulting with people now, people still do this to this day. So there's a couple things I would say are very key into understanding real estate. The first thing is how to value a property. And the third part is actually part of the cash flow is to understand that real estate has expenses, right? Something that I realized even recently. So the great thing about real estate is you always learn. You learn every day. You can never know it all. You will never know it all. But during the pandemic, I couldn't believe how many investors I talked to that were struggling because they had no expenses put up. They were literally, as they get their cash, right, they pay their bills and whatever's left, they were spending. So when something like the pandemic happened and rent started to slow, they were in trouble because they didn't put up for expenses. And you have to put up properly for expenses. When you look at your income, you look at your expenses, and sometimes people don't take that into account, right? You have taxes, you have insurance, you have, maintenance, repairs, all those things, and you just never know. I'm very conservative now when it comes to a property. Until I have 6 months worth of expenses put up, I won't spend $1 for my property. Everything gets reinvested back into the property until I have 6 months of expenses, right? That sounds very, very conservative. But on the flip side, if a tenant moves out, if a tenant doesn't pay, I'm okay for a while. right? So I think that understanding the value, understanding that you have expenses and you want a cash flow, right? You don't want to just focus on appreciation to build wealth in real estate. You want a cash flow along the way. And you also want to make sure you put up those expenses. Understanding your expense ratio or what your total expenses are, that's key to this business.
So that's cool. I mean, I used to follow a similar model in real estate investing. You know, I used to say, 3 to 6 months of expenses to put up. But recently I had an ordeal coming out of COVID where I changed that that mentality now. And I'm even going 10 to 12 months now to
Man.
up it a little bit more, because I had a situation where a tenant, didn't pay rent for almost 2 years with COVID. And then, the money that I had set aside to take care of the expenses and paying for the property, that money ran out. So I had to dip into my personal reserves to kind of cover it. And thank God that I was a saver.
Yes.
First, before anything, I was able to maneuver some things. I was able to access some of the cash value in my life insurance to kind of cover me for a little while. But, now, every investment property that I have now, I'm bumping that up to 10 months. And the reason I'm bumping it up to 10 months now is, and I recommend this to all my clients as well, is that, the Department of Labor came out and said that if you are making a good income, they classify it as like, 85,000 or more, it will take you approximately 10 months if you lost your job to get another job that's going to be paying you the equivalent amount of income. So I kind of use that information now and just moved it over to the real estate to make sure that I got at least 10 months, because I feel I've in my own planning now, and I think that since the real estate foreclosures and all of that stuff has gotten cleared out, most times, depending on the location, you should be able to have that tenant out and have a new tenant back in at least in 10, 12 months. So
I'm glad you said that, right? Because I have no problem with that. That's even more conservative than what I said. And funny thing is, people look at me like I'm crazy, like I'm ultra conservative. You're even more conservative than me, right? And the reason I have no problem with that is because something else that you learn along the journey is just because you can buy a piece of property doesn't mean you should, right? So I went through a phase where if I can get approved for it or I had enough cash, I was going to buy something because I could. And I said, I'll figure it out long term. But now I'm very strategic in buying a property. It kind of has to make perfect sense and it has to fit all my criteria. So what I learned along this journey is sometimes the best deals are the ones you say no to, right? So because a lot of times when you're young and you're eager and you want to acquire, you just jump at things. And sometimes it's not the right thing. And you'll even stretch your numbers. You'll have this criteria, has to cash flow this, the appreciation has to be this, expenses have to be this. And then what happens is you can't find nothing to meet your criteria. So you start changing it a little bit. You start going away from it. And next thing you know, you're so far away from it that you shouldn't even have it in the first place. So, but I say that because if you're not actively trying to buy everything, that gives you a time to build up that reserve. But one of the things that we have to get away from is trying to speed everything up. I had a gentleman, a friend of mine, Andre Hatchett, he always tells me, look, sometimes you got to slow down to speed up, right? Yeah. And sometimes when you slow down and able to take a step back, you can, be really strategic and make great moves instead of trying to be in a rush, because social media has us feeling like we got to get it right now. We got to get it right now. When, the average millionaire isn't someone that's 22 years old. People haven't reached $1 million by the time they're 30 and they act like they're a failure. And I'm like,
I know, right?
It's kind of wild. It's absolutely wild. So, sometimes slowing up.
The internet does teach you that if you don't have success in 35 seconds, you are a failure.
Yes.
Because I think the imagery that everyone's looking at what this perceived success is on social media is a big lie.
Yeah.
It's funny that you said your mentor told you, what you told you. One of the things that I learned very early on in my entrepreneurial journey, one of my first true mentors that I actually, as we call it, masterminding today, that I was actually in a group back in the day before we even called it that. His name was Clinton Lewis, and he used to always say, inch by inch is a cinch. It's the yard that's hard. So I just wanted to pair those two things up, because those were two great acts of wisdom, coming to help you to kind of navigate the things that you're doing. Now, you have mentioned the things that you should look into as far as evaluating a property, you said, you do valuation, you talked about cash flow, you talked about expenses. So what role does location play in all of this as well?
So location is probably one of the biggest factors as it pertains to real estate. Everyone hears the old axiom of location, location, location.
Mhm.
But it's deeper than that. There are more attributes than location that go into valuing a property, right? And as
Okay.
someone that writes real estate models, what I do know is there are things such as binary variables, such as whether it has a garage or it doesn't, has central air or it doesn't, size of your lot, size of your building. But what always rings true is each variable, right, presents itself in a certain way, but the one that is always the strongest is your location. Because in real estate, every neighborhood goes through what's called the neighborhood life cycle, right? Where a neighborhood starts to grow, then it stabilizes, right? And then it stabilizes and then it declines, right? So you have the growth, stabilization, decline, then growth again. Every neighborhood goes through this. Is something that's constant. It's the reason why some of the talk around gentrification is always interesting to me, because from an economic standpoint, the neighborhood life cycle is always in motion. What changes the neighborhood life cycle, which is that factor of stabilization, a lot of times is predicated upon how much home ownership you have.
Mm.
So if you have an area that has a high level of home ownership, it'll be stable a lot longer. Um, Most neighborhoods are in flux, where it goes from homeowners to renters, what have you, and then it declines and then revitalizes. So it's no way around the term gentrification to stop happening, because it will always happen, because resources are not in that area and then they get poured into the area. So location is always important to that. And if you understand how to see where a neighborhood is in the neighborhood life cycle, you know where to position yourself as an investor to kind of be ahead of the curve, in terms of before resources start to get pulled into that specific area. So,
So how long does a typical neighborhood life cycle last?
so that's interesting, because it all depends upon external factors such as the level of home ownership, the who's in control of that specific county or kind of government you have. So, an example in Philadelphia, for those that are familiar with Philadelphia, there is a neighborhood called Chestnut Hill, right? It's in the northwest section of the city. That neighborhood has been stable since my entire life, but they also have one of the highest levels of home ownership in the entire city of Philadelphia. But there
Mm.
are other parts of the city that have changed literally multiple times during my life period. And a lot of times that's based upon what's going on around it, right? So this is why location is so important, because when you have a great location, external things can influence the value. So an example would be Philadelphia is becoming more and more of a college town now. So a lot of land near college towns that were once depressed are now extremely valuable. Temple University changed an entire neighborhood. Penn and Drexel changed an entire neighborhood. St. Joe's has just revitalized that entire neighborhood. And now I'm seeing it happen right now. As we speak, I'm noticing an uptick in things towards LaSalle University. So this city is really becoming a collegiate town. But that's an external influence that comes into play. But there's other external influences, right? If you get a good grade school, a good public school, right, that can change an entire neighborhood, right? So
Mhm.
it's so many factors. Um, there are factors that contribute to value. The acronym is called PEGS, PEGS, which are physical factors, which is the physical structure, environmental factors, government factors, right? And then societal factors. So all those factors contribute to value, but they work with the location of the land. Because here's the one thing that most people don't understand about real estate: the value is actually in the land, not the building, right?
Mm.
Think
Talk
about
about
this.
that a
All
little bit.
right, so what area do you live in? All
I'm over in South Jersey.
right, so you're in South Jersey, right? So in South Jersey, what would you consider to be one of the more valuable counties or cities?
So we have Voorhees, we have Morristown, we have
Okay.
Cherry Hill. You
All
know,
right,
those
cool.
are those will probably be the three
All right, so I'm
biggest.
familiar with those. So let's take Morristown.
Okay.
If I build a structure in Morristown, right,
Mhm.
it'll cost me X to build. Now, if I build that same structure in Camden, my building costs won't change that much. How much it costs to build? I'm taking a raw piece of land and I'm building a structure.
Okay.
My construction cost won't be that much difference, but the value in the property will be different. And why is that?
Because of where the land is. Okay,
One's
I
in
got you.
Morristown and one's in Camden, right?
Got you.
So
Mhm.
the value in real estate really goes back to where the land is located. So that, goes to your question about location, but also about like the neighborhood, right? So the value is always in the land. There was an economist by the name of Henry George who talked about this constantly. And people that follow his philosophy are called Georgists. And he always talked about land tax and why, the way we tax is wrong. It should be done on the land because the value of real estate is always in the land. So that's an example of why right there.
Okay, good. So we're talking to Jimmy Williams tonight on Monday, Money Mondays. Here with me, Jeff, the Wealth Builder, and I love Money Mondays because it gives me an opportunity to talk to a dope financial professional, and I am talking to a dope financial professional tonight in regards to the math of real estate. So with that in time, talk about your experience and what would you consider to be the most effective strategies for maximizing your return of investment in real estate.
So that's interesting because that kind of it kind of works in conjunction with some of the other things I said in terms of understanding how to value a property upon purchase, right? Mm-hmm. If you understand the numbers going into the deal, that's where you make your money. But something else I'll mention in reference to that question is something very simple. Customer service, right? Every business, I don't care what business you're in, is a customer service business, right? Because whether your customers are your investors, whether they're your tenants, whether they're buying widgets from you, it's a customer service business. And I think a lot of landlords miss out on this. And this is where you get the terms such as slumlord and things like that. Because if you provide a quality housing, you answer requests and calls about things going wrong, and you really practice your customer service, you can have a tenant in your property for a long period of time. I've had tenants in properties that have been there 20 plus years, right? Aren't going anywhere. I would rather have that than to be going back and forth with tenants, evicting people all the time. I'm not saying those things don't happen because things happen, but customer service is something that I think a lot of people in the real estate industry don't really put a lot of value in or put enough time and effort into, trying to be the Chick-fil-A of real estate, right? Because it's a customer service business, whether I'm talking about having investors that are investing in me developing a property, whether I'm talking about the tenants that you deal with every day, whether I'm talking about even your partners, such as your lenders. Understanding how to treat people and work in customer service, to me, is a key to your ROI, believe it or not. But in terms of the math, it's knowing your value and your income and your expenses before you buy. You don't want to be surprised by anything. Anything that comes up after purchase, you should have already been prepared for.
So are there any other misconceptions that one should consider? Because, you just dropped something on customer service. That was one of the things that I'm like, hey, I got to pay a little bit more attention to, because one of the things that I look on in our personal side of life and just in business is that people only can remember how you make them feel.
Absolutely.
So, and incorporating that into the whole real estate scenario, as far as investing and getting a return on that investment, that is something that I think more landlords should really put some more focus into. Is there any other misconceptions that you want to drop on us today?
So the biggest misconception I'll say in real estate is that I don't care what your favorite IG guru tells you. I don't care what your favorite course person tells you. Real estate is never passive. It's not passive.
Oh, okay. Talk about that a little bit.
All right. So the only way real estate can possibly be passive is if you're buying a real estate investment trust on the stock market. Outside of that, when you start to buy property and you acquire tangible property, it's not passive. I don't care if you have a property manager, because who's going to watch them, right? I have property managers. I have properties, and I still have to watch over everything. If you care to grow a real estate business, right? Some people get in real estate just for the sake of saying I own this property. But if you're trying to build a true business, it's not passive. You can put, a distance between yourself and say your tenants or your contractors, but it's still not passive. If you care to scale a business or build a business, and even if you don't want to scale to 1,000 doors, even having 2 or 3 properties, you still have a business. And having a business, you have to pay attention to that business. You're planting seeds and you want them to grow, but you still have to water. You have to pay attention. So I see a lot of times online, people say, it's just passive. You just buy the property and the money just comes in. And I mean, it sounds cool. The stuff goes viral, but it's not real life.
See, now you just hit me with something, because, I always look at it like, okay, if I got a property and I had a property management company, that after all of those expenses have been paid, then it's kind of passive, what's left over. You buy the property right, you make sure cash flow is right after all your expenses, and what's left over after you put aside away for stash for saving. That money left over is really income that you can use to do investments or lifestyle or whatever the situation is, donate to charities, whatever that is. So now you just threw something on me now. He's like, who going to watch the property management company? So I'm like, oh, so that is another little thing that
you have to protect your investment, man. There was the great philosopher known as Christopher Wallace or Biggie to some. He once said, I got lawyers watching lawyers, so I won't go broke, right? At the end of the day, it still falls on you. So I've had situations just through experience where, especially, and I no longer do this, but I used to buy properties in long distance. So I own some properties in Carolina, Cincinnati, Atlantic City. And I would have property managers that would have certain expenses. Come to find out, there never was an expense. That work didn't need to be done, nor was it done, right? But I blame myself because I wasn't, paying attention enough to realize, like, yo, this guy keeps charging me for this. Like, I would just do what you said. All right, everything's taken care of. I still got a little bit of cash at the end of the month. Cool, because I don't have to worry about it. Not realizing that I should have a lot more than this. You're hitting me, you're nickel and diming me for things that don't take place. You talk to a tenant, that never happened. Like, so you have to be watching the person that you hired to watch your property. So if you care, like I'm just telling you that in my experience, it's never completely passive.
Okay, cool. Let's switch gears a little bit. We were talking about some things earlier about, evaluations in the math of real estate, right? So one of the things that it's a big talk on in the community, in the environment right now, and in the communities of real estate. Should you buy a property right now because interest rates are high? The Fed's coming out, and it's people are talking like maybe they're going to cut next year. Who knows? So can you explain or talk a little bit about like how the economic factors or like interest rates, like how that affects real estate, you're doing real estate investment, not only as interest rate, but also, following that, and I'll restate the question to that later, would be to talk about a little bit about inflation as well.
Yeah. So those things actually, we could talk about them in combination because they work hand in hand, right? To simplify it, right? To keep it very simple, the higher your interest rate, the more it costs to borrow, right? So you can buy more property with a lower interest rate than you can with the higher interest rate. So that tends to affect the market. Now, what's interesting about this market, and I could speak specifically to the Philadelphia market, but I see it in a lot of major metropolitan areas. People have what's known as golden handcuffs. So they're stuck in these mortgages that are like, sub 4, like they're 3.5, even as low as 2.5 or 2%. And they own these properties and they can't sell because they kind of have a golden handcuff, meaning that if they sell the property, they have to then go buy something else. And who's going to get rid of a 2% mortgage to go get a 7% mortgage? Most people won't do so. So on the one hand, it's a good thing I'm stuck at this too, but now I'm kind of stuck there, which means now with supply and demand, there's not a lot of supply on the market. So values aren't decreasing the way that they typically do when interest rates rise. So there's not a lot of inventory for people who are buying. Now, a lot of this is caused by inflation. The reason the rates go up are to try to ease inflation. And the thing about inflation is a silent tax. I really believe that if the average person understood what inflation is or how it worked, they would be in the streets with pitchforks.
Yep.
Because inflation is literally a silent tax. I just taught a class last week, and what I told them was this. I said, if the government, right, said, hey, we're going to knock on everybody's door. We want to go to war. We need every household to contribute $100 across the entire nation. No one will want to do that. They would say, what do you mean, right? But they have a genius way of doing it. We won't even ask you for that. We'll just print more money. We'll print more money. Instead of asking you, we'll just print more money. Now that we print more money, the money that's already in circulation loses value. By that money losing value, goods and services now cost more money. They figured out a way to stick you up for tax without it appearing as though you're being stuck up for tax, right? So then what tends to happen because of inflation, people that are in the business of buying assets or investments, those investments start to rise because capital pulled into them is better than capital sitting in cash. So having my money into ownership of companies via the stock market or having it in buildings, land, even having it in Bitcoin, whatever it may be, those things start to rise in value based upon the dollar being worth less. So, the tax code will tell you this. If you read the tax code tells you where they want you to put your money. And you put your money there, your money will grow. But if you don't have that understanding, you're losing purchasing power literally every day. So those things work in conjunction, because now that we're trying to slow down inflation, one way to do that is to, kind of make the cost to borrow more. But all these different economic factors that most of us don't have any control over are affecting our lives, which is why part of wealth is understanding politics. People try to separate these things out, but you can't. You can't, because the government has control over a lot of things that you don't. Even in real estate, right? I tell people in real estate, if you don't pay attention to politics, it can cost you. And again, I started this by telling you my journey through politics into economics, but those things are tied. You can never separate them. If I have a piece of property, right, what happens if I don't pay my taxes?
You lose it.
Exactly. Now, another thing is, if I have a piece of property and I want to build whatever I want to build, who do I have to get approval from?
From the neighborhood politician.
Exactly. You have to be involved or understand what's going on around you. I sit sometimes and I watch a council hearing, and they'll literally just change the zoning on an entire block. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, the average person has no idea that just happened. But that affects their value, right? So you got these things are tied together. Education, politics, healthcare, criminal justice system. All of these things are tied into one. We can't just pay attention to one and just ignore the other. So that will be my thing about inflation, as well as the interest rate. All that stuff is tied together, but it all has an effect in our life, and we have to be paying attention to that.
The reason why I brought that up, because one of the primary things that I am advocating and getting into defensive strategy is, I believe, and I hope I'm wrong, that right after this election next year, that we're going to enter a period where not only are we going to have inflation, but we're also going to have deflation as well. So, and I don't think most people are even thinking about this happening all at the same time, and how that's going to affect your assets, how that is going to affect your buying power, how that is going to affect all of the different things as it's going to come to, and especially as it relates to you managing the money that's coming in under your management. So inflation and deflation is going to be something huge and we're going to talk about that in upcoming episodes as we get closer to this time period that I think is going to happen. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So if you had a famous real estate mogul that you had an opportunity to work with, who would that real estate mogul be and why?
So is that dead or alive, or is it
dead or alive?
So there's a gentleman who may not be very well known. His name is Philip Payton, right? And for those that have never heard of him, just go to YouTube or Google, do your Googles. His name is Philip Payton. He was a real estate agent and developer and investor in New York, right? And what he used to do was he literally is partially responsible for the Harlem Renaissance.
Oh, really?
A lot of people don't realize that it started with real estate. Okay. So he initially ran his strategy in Manhattan, but then he went to Harlem. And what he would do is he would find most of the time back then the property was owned by white people. So he would find white people that had some sort of conflict, offer to buy one of them out. He would buy the property. Then what would happen is the person wouldn't want to live next door because of racism to someone black. So they would start to sell their property, and he would end up buying a whole block, right? And what he would do is provide quality housing, bring his own people in, right, and congregate them in certain areas. He did that in Harlem, which is how a lot of black families started to, become tenants and owners in Harlem. He was responsible for that. Then another thing he would do is there would be certain white landlords who tried to fight back, and they would come in and buy a property and evict all the black people. So he would find a property on the same block that had white tenants, buy the property and evict them, and then move in the black families that just got evicted from the white guy. And eventually what would happen is he would end up getting the whole block, because he said, and one of his quotes was, because they're racist, I'm going to make them pay for it economically, right?
Wow.
And his story, and again, we don't hear these stories all the time, but his name is Philip Payton. And they did it's a couple of YouTube videos where they actually break down his strategies and things like that. But what always impressed me about his story is he used real estate as a tool of empowerment, right? So it's real estate. And if you've ever read the book, The Color of Law, um, it breaks this down. There's another book called Family Properties by an author named Beryl Satter that breaks how real estate was used as a tool of oppression. But this is a gentleman who, like, use real estate as a tool to kind of elevate and bring in culture, arts, and create a wealth within his community. And what he used to do was he would take all his buildings and put his initials on them and say PAP, Philip A. Payton. Yeah. So it was a big thing in New York. He's legendary out there, but his story is not often told. But that will be someone I would like to build with, because to me, it's not all about buying things. It's not all about having doors. You have to be able to use these assets as a tool of empowerment.
I like that. That's one of the things that I'm trying to I guess I could say duplicate in a different realm, even with cash value life insurance.
Yes.
I know it's a big talk about reparations in our communities right now. One of the things that I'm doing is, like, with the clients that I speak with and talk to, is to have like the insurance companies really to provide reparations for your family, with a large death benefit at the time that you die. That's the most cost-effective way that you can have a guaranteed way that your family will have reparations, through life insurance. And one of the things that I love teaching about life insurance is I think it's one of the most miseducated, misinformed, greatest financial product you can ever have in your portfolio, because of not what it is, because of what it does. And I think as what we focus in on what cash value life insurance does, and when people understand the benefits that comes with it, they will want to have it to be a part of their financial portfolio. So it is great when you have real estate. It's great when you have stocks. It's great when you have a business, because of the things that it will give you the permission slip to do. So I'm glad that you shared that story with Philip Payton. I'm going to go look him up, because
let me know what you think. Let me know what you think when you look him up, because I'm pretty sure
I'm going to check that out. So, and I will check back with you on that, because that's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
Just to even be able to do that in those times.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm sure it's probably tons of valuable lessons, not only in real estate, but also in life, that Absolutely. You can learn in a story like that. So that's fascinating. I'm definitely going to check that out. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, that if you had the power, and we're talking to Jimmy Williams from JW the Blueprint, also from Buy the Hood. He's a real estate, and not only investor, not only is he a real estate mathematician, not only is he a real estate evaluator, but he's an all-around dope guy. And I wanted you guys to get a taste and a touch of his genius, because he brings a lot of information and great knowledge to the space. And I'm happy that he's here again tonight. But one of the things I wanted to ask you today was, if you had the power to predict like one future trend in real estate, like what would that trend be, and how would it change the way that we invest today?
So I see three trends. I'll give it to you quickly, right? So one of the trends I see, it's because of population, and also the major cities are seeing an increase in population, or something called stack PUDs, right? Planned unit developments, but now they're stacking them. So they're very similar to a condo, but the way they differentiate themselves from a condo is the people that own the PUDs own the land below them. So it's not owned by an association. Oh. So it's a different way of structuring buildings that are sky high. So we're moving this way, so less space is being, built out, but it's being built up. So I see a lot of cities, starting to look like New York, right, with the skyscrapers. That's one thing I see. Another trend that I see is I see a lot of multi-generational living, especially coming out of COVID. COVID changed everything. Let's just face it. I mean, any aspect of life, COVID had an effect on, and real estate is no different. Because of everything going on in the economy, because of people moving together for COVID, I see a lot of going back to multi-generations being within one household. I see people buying houses now with mother-in-law suites that didn't used to happen. People actually ask for that stuff now. And you see families kind of like moving in, because it's a way to pool resources to kind of fight all these different economic things that are happening. I see more of that. And the third thing I would say that I see on a bigger scale is similar, but it's what they call work, live, play properties. So what a work, live, play property is it's a big development, has residential living, right? It has like a restaurant or something on the first floor and also offices there. So people literally have like a building almost becomes like its own city. You don't have to leave. There's a barber there. There's food there. There's a grocery store. I see a lot of new developments coming along that way because these are the things that people desire post COVID. So
We
those
have
are
a
three.
plethora of those in South Jersey. Those
See,
work,
and those are being
work
built
living
left and
play.
right.
Oh my gosh.
And sometimes when I go to conferences and talk to people that work in the like real estate data science space, they say these are popping up everywhere. They're popping up in Seattle, they're popping up in Jersey, they're in Philadelphia, like you see them in New York, DC. Like it's a thing, and this is what the people desire. Now, I don't want to have to go 60 miles to the suburbs to go to work anymore. I want to have everything in close proximity, and you can't get any closer than getting on the elevator and going to work.
How do you think this tiny homes are going to play out?
So that's interesting, right? Because in Philadelphia, we don't have too many of them, right? So I don't see that necessarily as of yet. I see more of building up as opposed to just having small, tiny homes on lots. I see more people building up. But again, as population continues to increase, we're going to have to figure out some way. We have a bad problem with the unhoused in this country, and we have to do something to kind of combat that. So that could be a solution in certain areas. Like I know I talk to people in the Midwest in the real estate game, and they see them more often than I do here. So what I see here is building up. That could be their solution out there. But I think a lot of different things will be tried to kind of combat this problem. One of the things I said, again, I see multi-generational living. I never seen it that much, but now I see people with grandmom living there, mom living there, and they all have their own space.
Interesting. Very interesting. Jimmy Williams here, By the Hood, JW the Blueprint, Money Mondays with Jeff the Wealth Builder. We're talking about the math of real estate and how real estate is such a viable vehicle to have in your portfolio. One of the things that I wanted to get into a little bit, because we talked earlier, you told me a little bit about your background before you got in real estate hard, which, you did some stuff in the insurance industry. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, how do you see life insurance and real estate investing being, the best of both worlds to have in your portfolio?
That's a good question. Yeah, I was telling you, I was once licensed in real estate as well as securities and a lot of different things. And I decided to specialize instead of just being general across the board. And now I just converse with people like you who are specialists in insurance. But I think insurance plays a huge part in a number of ways, right? In a number of ways, strategically speaking, if you're an investor and you have the ability to use that as a bank, so to speak, it's not for everybody, right? So one of the reasons, and I told you this, that it kind of shot away from the business was some of the companies in the business. They would be in the business of just cranking out what pays the highest commission versus what's best for the client. And one of the things that you and I both agree on is everybody's situation is different. There's certain scenarios where this product will work, and there's certain scenarios where this product will work. And most companies I work for had like, this is the best product and we're going to push this, right? Now, with that being said, to replace the loss of someone's income, that's always important. I don't care whether we're talking about someone who has a portfolio as an investor or someone who just has their own property, right? We live in a world now where most households need multiple streams of income to sustain a household, again, because of inflation and because of the cost of living. So none of us can predict the future or predict tomorrow. What happens when one goes? You have a whole source of income that has to be replaced. So I think insurance plays a huge part in wealth building and can play a huge part in real estate from a number. It's not one way. It's multiple ways, whether that is to use it strategically if you want to scale up a real estate business, but also just that replacement of income is so important. It's so important. And what I'll tell you is from someone that has that's lost family, that's had insurance, it also helps when you have insurance if you lose someone that has a property, because you don't have those worries. What am I going to do with this property? My aunt still had a mortgage. How am I going to pay the mortgage? Well, she had insurance, right? So that can be taken care of. It helps you grieve, because there's certain things you just don't have to worry about. So I think that insurance plays an important part. And I was telling you, one of the strategies I teach is about keeping things simple, no matter what your asset classes that you decide to participate in, but you got to have that umbrella above it to protect it. So for me, insurance is part security, part investment instrument. It can be. So I think insurance is important.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I share a lot is that a lot of times in Black and brown families, we go through a double death because insurance is not present.
Yeah.
We got to deal with the emotional ramifications of losing our loved one. And then we have to deal with another death because that money that loved one was bringing into the household stops. So now that income replacement is huge. So I stress that all the time because you're going to need some money for the future to continue to buy things for lifestyle, for investments, for education, just for to maintain your standard of living. One of the things, especially when kids are involved, is that a kid should never lose two parents because one parent left, untimely.
Yeah.
Because now mom or dad now got to pick up a second job, to kind of replace the income, and now they lost a kid in the process of that.
Yep.
Another thing is, I'll just share a recent experience. Why I love the cash value part of it is I was going through a rehab. I was telling you earlier, I had a tenant that was in there for that didn't pay rent, and when we got the tenant out, we had to rehab the whole place. And one of the things that gave me the comfort is that I know that I didn't have to worry about providing any financials. I didn't have to worry about debt to income ratios. I didn't have to worry about what my credit score looked like. I didn't even have to worry about a repayment schedule, because I can fund that project with my life insurance and just repay myself back just as I was paying back a hard money lender. So I was able to cut that process and cut that middle person out and be able now to recapture the cost back to me because I didn't have to use a hard money lender or have to use a mortgage company to do the rehab. So It gave me that flexibility, it gave me that liquidity, and more importantly, it gave me that control. And one of the things I always stress to my entrepreneurial clients is never give up control. So that's one of the things, and one of the reasons why I love, cash value life insurance is that it puts me in the driving seat because of the living benefits. It's funny because a lot of people always think that you got to die to get life insurance. And I always say to them, where in the word does life insurance, does it talk about death? But most of us in our community, we always associate it, with someone dying. So it's just more education that needs to play in that. So next month, I'm going to this conference. It's in Atlanta. It's called Traffic, Sales, and Profit. And with Lamar Tyler, absolutely. And one of the things, one of the speakers that is speaking that I'm really looking forward to hearing from is Don Peoples. And I've been really impressed in reading a lot of the things that he's done in the real estate world, in the real estate environment. So I'm looking so forward to hearing him speak. Is there any real estate professionals alive that you would love to hear some wisdom from?
So it's a lot. I mean, but he will be one of them. I read his book, People's Principles, and what he's been able to accomplish is extraordinary. And also some of the things that we talked about today, he talks about in his book in terms of understanding how to navigate politically, because him being a people person, helped, for lack of a better term, helped him grow his empire. So he's definitely one. And there are a number of folks, right? So that's one of the things that I do love about certain spaces, such as like going to FinCon and networking with other folks that look like us, is because I like the people that are in the trenches doing the work day to day that are talking to the people, right? There's a lot of famous people, a lot of celebrities. I'm not into that. I'm into the people that are in the communities, touching the people, doing the work. One of the reasons I agreed to come on with you is because I know what you're trying to do, right? And I know you have the best interest of our people in mind when you do your work. And I think that's important. And that's important to me. But Don Peoples is one of the guys, because again, he's someone that looks like me and who's done it at the highest levels. So I definitely have to give him his flowers. But there are a number of folks that I wouldn't mind building with and talking to, because for me, it's all about learning and getting better. And then how do I give that to the community? So everything that we do, so you talked about my organization, By the Hood, everything we do is community first. We never put profits before people, ever. In fact, I would say 99% of the money that we make as By the Hood as an organization, we put right back into the streets. We give right back away because we make our monies in the fields that we teach about, right? I make my money through real estate. I don't make my money through selling courses or anything like that. I make my money in the stock market. I make my money, you know, in the services that we actually talk about. So we do a giveaway every Friday. We do a free camp every summer. We teach in prisons. We teach the youth study center. These are things that we do because, to me, people will always come before profit. So I like to meet people that are in the trenches and doing the work. So that's kind of what I'm about. And these are the kind of people I like to network with.
That's awesome. I mean, you know, one of the big life lessons I learned was from my late pastor, Lamont McLean. He used to always say, you can never influence what you avoid. So I think that community service portion is so important in everything that we're doing, because how are you going to be a pillar of influence if you are avoiding the things that you are called to influence?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is so important. I commend you for all of the great things that you're doing in the community.
Appreciate that.
And I'm looking forward of some bigger things that's going to come out of the works that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to have the opportunity to kind of chop it up with you tonight on Money Mondays.
Absolutely.
And get some financial wisdom in real estate. Is there anything else that you would like to drop on the audience? And more importantly, let people know where they can reach you.
So yeah, my personal page is at JW the Blueprint, and that is on every platform, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, the whole nine, Facebook. But my company, Buy the Hood, you go to buythehood.com. And also our camp is buythehoodcamp.com is our second website, which is for our free camp for the youth ages 5 and up. It's completely free. We do that every summer. And the last words I would like to leave the audience is just to love each other, right? Because one of the things about the idea of Black wealth is we spend a lot of times talking about specific instruments, right? But I think that really being village-based and community-minded is the biggest asset. The biggest asset you have, right, is your relationships and how you treat people, right?
Yeah.
I got the opportunity to spend some time and go to dinner and build with Jeff and his wife in New Orleans, and we built a relationship that cultivated into me coming here now, possibly being part of some of his in-person events, right? So
yeah, man.
But it all comes from relationships and being able to have great conversations and build with people, and to not always look to take, but also to give.
That's right.
I think that is important because relationships in my experience and in my life have gotten me in doors that money can never do, right? I've been able to really sit in front of billionaires and millionaires and kings and queens based upon relationships, not money. So I think that part of us in terms of building wealth as a community comes with how we treat each other, right? So I always like to tell people that Buy the Hood started about property, but Buy the Hood at this point equals Black love, because that's what we teach. That's what we talk about. And I know people are tired of me saying it because I say it on any platform I get a chance to, but that is literally what we are about. So I want to thank you again for this opportunity.
I want to challenge you to amplify that message. Yes. Because I think that is a message that at this particular time needs to be resonated and been blasted over all of our communities. It's funny that you mentioned that, because we used to have that. I remember growing up in North Philly, and we had a community, where if I was doing wrong, people would tell my parents, Jeff was over here doing X, Y, and Z. So, and that sense of community helped me to survive. So now we need to get back to those roots, and then put this financial education and this financial literacy on top of it, so we can help each other build, develop, and grow, so we can be in a prosperous prosperous state. Because it seems like I heard it was funny. I was listening to Earn Your Leisure's podcast with my wife this past weekend, and no, I'm sorry. It was with Mace and
Cam
and Cam's podcast.
Okay.
And one of Cam was saying that a lot of the times that people did bad in Harlem when he grew up, what he saw was because of the lack of money.
Yeah.
So the lack of money caused them to feel some type of way and have them to do some things that they were not proud of. So if we can get this money thing back and recalibrate it, that we can use as a force for education, we can eliminate a lot of the problems and a lot of the ills that's going on in the communities that we live in. So I'm gonna be more intentional and more focused on putting that aspect out. So when we understand what's going on, we would know what to do. So we can continue to be able to spread that love and
Yep.
spread that prosperity and be givers. We can repair our communities and get back to being a thriving force that we once were.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. Anytime you need me, you know how to reach me because I'm all about that.
So thanks again, Jimmy. Jimmy Williams, By the Hood, JW, the Blueprint. I like that name. We got that blueprint thing to make you in that real estate game.
Yeah, here's the funny thing. I actually got that from one of my colleagues at an insurance company. Right?
Get out of here.
So when I first started
tell us that story real quick.
So when I first started working insurance, one of the things I would do is I would kind of like write down goals. I used to carry around a moleskin notebook. I got it from Jim Rohn. I used to listen to a lot of Jim Rohn. And I would take a moleskin notebook and I would write down like, these are the things I want to do, all this. And so one of the guys who worked there jokingly said, man, you write everything down. You call you the blueprint. You like writing out blueprints. And it became like a joke within the office. And then when I got on social media, like 2006, 2007 or what have you, my name is common Jimmy or James Williams. So I was like, they call me the blueprint in the office. Let me use that. And I just ran with it ever since. So yeah, I actually got that from an insurance colleague.
Yo, that's a good fitting name. I like that name.
I appreciate that, Jeff. I appreciate you, man.
Keep doing good, man. Keep spreading love, man, and just in getting people to make themselves the biggest investment. Because Absolutely. If they can make themselves the biggest investment, everything around them will get better. And that's the core of what really being, for me, being financially literate and being prosperous and being wealthy and rich is all about. It's about Absolutely. Having your biggest investment and being able to have the money to fund the things that you are passionate about. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I would say send your wife my regards as well. Tell her I said hi.
And you do the same thing with yours.
I will do, man. Take care. I appreciate you.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for being on this episode of Money Mondays. We were with Jimmy Williams, JW, the Blueprint. Make sure you go follow him. Follow his organization, buythehood.com. Make sure you go and send a donation to help the kids this summer. The more money that we can donate to help the kids, the more kids that can be able to get some knowledge to help change the trajectory of their lives and put them in a position of empowerment as they go forward. So thank you for tonight for being on Money Mondays. And I look forward to seeing you on episode 8 next. Well, we're taking off Christmas, which is my birthday, y'all. So next Monday is my birthday. So we're going to take that day off, but we're going to come back strong for 2024. 7 episodes is down. Looking forward to having many, many more. Thank you guys for being on this journey, and thank the Cash Value Wealth Builders for being a sponsor of this event. And we're leveraging professionals and entrepreneurs. We're leveraging Cash Value Life Insurance to be a tool for income replacement and to be in a position to buy assets that's going to produce passive monthly income. So we're excited to get that thing going and get excited. If you want to learn more about that, get in contact with me. Send me some information and more information about the community will be coming out. We're planning a virtual conference in February of next year, 2024, for Black History Month. And we're going to do a first live event in Wilmington, Delaware in April of 2024. And hopefully Jimmy will come and lend his expertise.
I'll be there.
I'm kind of putting him on a hook, y'all. Hopefully Jimmy will come and lend his expertise and be able to do a more intimate setting and teaching you real estate evaluations and understanding the math around real estate, because real estate is sexy. Real estate is a great thing to own, but real estate is even a greater thing to own when you own it the right way. So Jimmy he's been expert in helping people own properties the right way. And we're going to be looking forward to getting more information from him in the future so that we can all prosper and win. So thank you for being on this edition for Monday Mondays. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Peace. I'm Jeff, the Wealth Builder, your host, and I'll say peace out until we see each other next time. Have a great day, guys.